Lord of Mysteries. My Identities Echoes Across Time. Chapter 191 to 200. In the fourth epic, the nation of Evernight. Though called a nation, the nation of Evernight's scale was not particularly large. Compared to powerful empires like the Tudor Empire and the Solomon Empire, it was at most a prosperous city. However, this city was indeed peaceful and harmonious, with an atmosphere of tranquility that empires like Tudor lacked. The ongoing war between the four emperors seemed to have no impact here. Life continued as usual. It's worth noting that every resident of the nation of Evernight was a follower of Antigonus and his sister, the Mother of the Sky. In life, they leaned towards worshipping the Mother of the Sky. When they naturally reached the end of their lives, they would be transformed into secret puppets without any pain, eternally accompanying Antigonus. This seemed to be a habit of Antigonus and the Mother of the Sky, a habit dating back to when Antigonus, just a miracle invoker, living with his sister. He would share followers with his sister in this manner, amassing secret puppets over time, eventually forming a puppet town. This enabled him to complete the ritual to become an attendant of mysteries. Although now a semi-fool and able to spread his faith openly, Antigonus retained this habit because his followers had long been accustomed to living with the Mother of the Sky in life and serving Antigonus in death. For the followers of the Mother of the Sky and Antigonus, becoming a secret puppet without pain at life's end to accompany their deities was a blessing. Every citizen of the nation of Evernight hoped for such an end, just as followers of gods wished to enter their deity's kingdom after death. Thus, even after completing his ascension, Antigonus maintained his old habit of preserving the puppet town. For Antigonus, the small nation of Evernight, this city of the deceased he had gradually built, was a rare place of peace and tranquility. He loved this nation and wished for this peaceful life to continue. This led to Antigonus almost fleeing back to the nation of Evernight for comfort from his sister after being frightened outside. What happened, Antigonus? You seem greatly frightened. Is a Sequence 0 targeting you? Asked a gentle woman wearing a hood and a dark cloak, her eyes as deep as the night. This woman was Antigonus's sister, the Mother of the Sky of the nation of Evernight. Not a Sequence 0. Antigonus shook his head, recounting his bizarre experience in the Tudor Empire. He didn't hide anything from his sister, with whom he had shared his memory upon realizing something was wrong with it. To his horror, his sister hadn't noticed any alteration in her memory, even with his prompt. She was puzzled but chose to trust Antigonus, acknowledging his higher resistance to such changes as a semi-fool compared to her Sequence 2 in the darkness pathway. Understanding she was too weak to perceive the change, she listened to Antigonus's account and furrowed her brow almost instinctively. So, you met the one who altered history. Her expression grew worried, and she added apologetically, I'm sorry, Antigonus. If I had known you would meet him, I wouldn't have read that book. Though Antigonus would have received the Tudor Tea Party invitation regardless, he might not have attended without that absurd fanfiction. That's not your fault, sister. That guy has a significant connection with Bethel, acting as his son. I would have encountered him sooner or later unless I avoided the Tudor Empire entirely, which is impossible. Antigonus shook his head, clearing in his thoughts. Since the Angel of Secrets chose to act as Libert Abraham, their meeting was inevitable. Moreover, judging by Lynn's attitude, Antigonus knew he would remember him. Avoiding him entirely was impossible. Thankfully, I can stay at home. The outside world is terrifying, home is better, Antigonus said, still shaken. I even suspect that guy wants to catch me as a pet dog. When he petted me, my spiritual intuition nearly exploded, with every hair warning me of danger. Sounds terrifying. Stay home. Perhaps he'll lose interest after a while. The Mother of the Sky, recognizing the severity, agreed with Antigonus's idea. But then she suddenly fell silent, staring behind Antigonus. After a hesitant moment, she asked, Antigonus, the one you mentioned, does he look about 15 or 16, with blonde hair, gray eyes, and very handsome? Yes, how did you know? I haven't described him yet, Antigonus asked, realizing something and stiffening. He looked at his sister with his eyes. Is he here? The Mother of the Sky nodded stiffly, barely moving. Doomed. Antigonus's mind flooded with visions of his possible deaths. He felt a hand on his head and, driven by a strong survival instinct, transformed into a wolf the size of a human. He heard a familiar voice behind him. Wow, he turned into a big dog again. Fluffy is the best. This feels way better than Evernight. End of chapter. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Antigonus felt a hand rubbing his wolf head in circles, left and right, with a professional touch, reminding him of the times his sister used to pet him. To be honest, he didn't mind it much since he was used to it. It wasn't until the hand finished that Antigonus finally gathered the courage to turn around, and unsurprisingly, saw the blonde-haired, gray-eyed young angel. The boy greeted him enthusiastically. "Hi, little Antigo, it's been a while, hasn't it? Even though we just met 2 days ago, it feels like forever." Antigonus. What nonsense, we just saw each other 2 days ago. Antigonus cried inwardly, but he couldn't say that. He forced a smile and said, "Indeed, it has been a long time." Due to his current form as a demonic wolf, the smile appeared particularly pained, reminding Lynn of some meme expressions he had seen in his previous life. PFF'd. Lynn couldn't help but laugh. He didn't intend to suppress his laughter as he patted the puzzled demonic wolf's head and said seriously, "Little Antigo, have you ever noticed that you look a lot like a black and white animal?" Antigonus. Antigonus didn't understand. He recalled the black and white animals he had seen but couldn't think of any that resembled him, so he asked, "What animal are you talking about?" "Wait, I'll draw it for you." Lynn took out a piece of parchment and quickly sketched a husky, then showed it to Antigonus, saying, "See, this kind of animal." Antigonus looked at the parchment and paused for a second when he saw the husky drawn on it. There were indeed huskies in the mysteries world, known as large pets that are both known for being silly and cute. So, Antigonus recognized the husky and knew what it was. Logically, the dignified demonic wolf should be angry at being compared to a husky. But after the demonic wolf family's incident, Antigonus had long thrown away the so-called demonic wolf's dignity. He even played a goofball husky to fulfill his role once. Therefore, Antigonus wasn't really angry. He just seriously thought about the husky's characteristics and compared them to his own, eventually falling silent. Antigonus didn't truly think he was like a husky, but he felt there might be some resemblance. Upon closer inspection, the demonic wolf's appearance did have similarities with a husky. Was it because huskies looked a bit like wolves? Antigonus instinctively pondered this, looking more and more like a thinking husky. PFF'd. Lynn couldn't help but laugh again. He snapped his fingers, and a pair of black-framed glasses appeared in his hand. Lynn seriously placed the glasses on Antigonus's head, looking at his bewildered, somewhat scholarly appearance, and nodded in satisfaction. "Yes, exactly like that, Antigonus. Whatever makes you happy." Antigonus decided to stop pondering the relationship between huskies and demonic wolves. At this moment, his gaze finally landed on the low-key Mr. Door beside Lynn, instinctively sending a sharp look his way. "Don't think I don't know. It's definitely this bastard Bethel who opened the door for Lynn to enter my nation of Evernight so quietly." However, Antigonus was surprised that this time, Bethel didn't retaliate after receiving his sharp look but instead looked away guiltily. Antigonus paused, and his canine instinct, along with his seer's intuition, gave him a bad feeling. Antigonus took a deep breath, looked at Lynn, and asked, "Lord Libert, what do you need from me?" "No need for formal titles, just call me Libert." Lynn waved his hand dismissively and smiled, "I just wanted to invite you to a tea party." "Tea party? What kind of tea party? Didn't we just beat up Tudor? Who's next?" Antigonus shivered, his mind flashing back to the scene of the Blood Emperor Tudor being ganged up on by them. He realized he had underestimated Lynn, who seemed to cause trouble more frequently than he imagined. "Can't we have a bit of peace for a while?" At that moment, Antigonus felt a rare sense of camaraderie with Bethel. Although beating up Tudor was fun, fighting Sequence 0 entities every day is not good, really. "What are you thinking? We're not fighting this time." Lynn, seeing through the demonic wolf's thoughts, said directly, "It's just a simple tea party. The attendees will include you, Bethel, and Amon. I might invite Azek too." Thinking of a certain death consul with no childhood, Lynn couldn't help but become more interested. Letting the Death Consul experience a real childhood seemed quite interesting and might help in prying him away from the god of death. Azek refers to the Death Consul of the Balaam Empire. Antigonus speculated. He had little contact with the Balaam Empire and knew about the Death Consul in name only. But what kind of tea party is this? Seeing Lynn's anticipation for the tea party, Antigonus's unease grew stronger. He couldn't help but ask, what is this tea party for? Well, it's for everyone to experience childhood. Lynn rubbed his chin and looked at Antigonus with a smile. You don't need to be so nervous. It's just a tea party where all participants have to revert to their child forms. This shouldn't be difficult for you, right? All participants reverting to child forms, doesn't that mean even Bethel? Antigonus instinctively looked at Mr. Dorr, who had already turned his head away, clearly not wanting to engage. Seeing this, Antigonus felt a bit schadenfreude, knowing that with Bethel's somewhat rigid personality, reverting to a child form would not be easily accepted. However, it's just reverting to a child. Antigonus breathed a sigh of relief and said to Lynn, no problem, I will attend the tea party on time. For Antigonus, who possessed a puppet town, playing as a child was no big deal. Although it might be a bit embarrassing in front of colleagues, as long as everyone was in the same boat, Antigonus didn't care. On the contrary, Antigonus began to look forward to the tea party, wanting to see his dear colleagues as little kids. This would be something to laugh about for centuries. The three housemates still have a very genuine plastic friendship. End of chapter. Since Antigonus, you've agreed, I'll notify you before the tea party is held. I hope you'll be punctual as you promised. Lynn smiled at Antigonus, then, as if thinking of something, pinched his chin and said, by the way, should we invite Tudor as well? Young Tudor might be interesting too. Lynn's intention was simple, he just wanted to tease Tudor. Antigonus and Bethel exchanged glances, engaging in a silent but intense conversation. Bethel spoke first, his tone gentle. His Majesty Tudor probably wouldn't enjoy such an event. Though not explicitly stated, the implication was clear. Please spare us the trouble, especially since you just dealt with Tudor. Bethel knew well that Lynn, with his seemingly mind-reading abilities, would understand the hidden meaning. Indeed, Lynn did understand Bethel's subtle message. He responded, but it's enough that I enjoy it. Tudor's opinion doesn't matter. He can't beat me anyway. And you two will help me, right? Lynn smiled innocently at the two key figures of Tudor's empire, providing them with a reason. As the saying goes, blessings are meant to be shared. Since you're both significant figures in Tudor's empire, you wouldn't want His Majesty Tudor to miss reliving his childhood, would you? Bethel, Antigonus. The two loyal subordinates exchanged another glance and nodded in unison. You're right. We can't be the only ones suffering, ahem. Antigonus almost blurted out his thoughts but quickly corrected himself, coughing to cover his slip and glancing at Lynn, who thankfully didn't seem angry. Bethel, more composed than Antigonus, silently apologized to Tudor before seriously stating, Libert, you're right. We can't deprive His Majesty Tudor of reliving his childhood. Antigonus glanced at Bethel with a look that said, I didn't expect this side of you. Lynn blinked, not surprised by Bethel's response, and said with a sincere tone, it seems everyone cares about His Majesty Tudor's well-being. He's lucky to have you both. The sincerity in his voice contrasted with the apparent schadenfreude. Honestly, I don't want to use forceful invitations. The tea party's principle is for everyone to have fun. Lynn sighed, discussing the fake principles of the tea party while his mind raced with ideas, forming an intriguing plan. Initially, Lynn's idea of hosting a tea party with young versions of Bethel, Amon, and Antigonus was merely for amusement. But now, he saw a bigger picture. Why not invite everyone to play along? He thought of inviting the Tudor Empire's Blood Emperor Tudor, Solomon, Trunsoest, and members of the six gods like the Evernight Goddess, Earth Mother, and Lord of Storms, plus King of Angels like Medici, Ouroboros, and will to create an unprecedented God's Tea Party. Lynn believed this would be a fascinating event. Just imagining the young versions of the four emperors interacting was thrilling enough. Solomon, Tudor, and Trunsoest, despite being children, would still be at odds, while young Ouroboros and young Will would stare each other down, with young Adam watching quietly until young Medici set his hair on fire. No, I can't think about this anymore, or I won't be able to stop myself. Lynn took a deep breath, restraining his impulse to summon everyone immediately, and continued contemplating the benefits beyond the fun. Firstly, the participants alone would make the tea party memorable, potentially being recorded in secret histories and murals, enhancing his angelic narrative and increasing his presence in this world. Secondly, Lynn could observe the attitudes of various gods and high rankers towards each other, gaining insights into the situation and finding opportunities to collaborate with entities like the Evernight Goddess, aiding his path to higher sequences. However, arranging this would be challenging. Lynn couldn't force everyone, it would make too many enemies. Fortunately, he planned to invite only a few familiar faces for the first God's Tea Party. This included important figures from the Tudor Empire like the Blood Emperor Tudor, Amon, Adam, Mr. Dor, and Antigonus. From the Solomon Empire, he would invite Solomon, the true creator, Medici, and Ouroboros, along with high-ranking members of the six gods like the Evernight Goddess, Earth Mother, and Lord of Storms, plus the nomadic Will and Balaam Empire's death consul Azek. Within the Tudor Empire, the main figures were a given. Amon and Antigonus were easy to invite, and Adam would likely join due to his usual demeanor. Tudor, having just been dealt with and with Amon and Antigonus watching, would probably comply or be persuaded by Adam. For the Solomon Empire, Medici, Ouroboros, and the True Creator were easy picks. Though Lynn wasn't fond of the True Creator, he couldn't ignore his significance. Yes, Lynn was that shameless. He believed Solomon would join with his allies' persuasion. The only issue was the sequence rivalry between Ouroboros and Will. To maintain harmony, inviting Ouroboros might mean not inviting Will, but Lynn really wanted to see them together. After serious consideration, Lynn made his decision. End of chapter. Lynn would clarify this matter with both parties before the tea party, discussing the pros and cons and mediating to the best of his ability to ensure Ouroboros and Will temporarily put aside their competition and simply enjoy the tea party. He would also act as Will's temporary guardian at the tea party, ensuring his safety throughout the event and guaranteeing his safe departure without being tracked, ensuring that both parties could abide by the agreement. However, if the negotiations before the tea party failed, Lynn would abandon this particular fun and give up inviting Will. He indeed enjoy having fun, but he wouldn't treat innocent lives as mere entertainment. As for inviting the Evernight Goddess and Earth Mother, Lynn planned to write a letter in pre-epic language to the Evernight Goddess and another letter to the Earth Mother discussing the dangers of the primordial moon, emphasizing that combating the Mother Goddess of depravity is everyone's responsibility. He believed the Earth Mother should choose to accept the invitation. Convincing the Death Consul was straightforward. Whether through official or private letters, Lynn was confident he could persuade him to come. The tricky part would be the Lord of Storms. Lynn wasn't very familiar with the Wind Angel, who also betrayed the ancient sun god. He didn't hold much animosity toward him, primarily because, with the Storm Pigeon's character, Lynn was almost certain that his betrayal was a spur-of-the-moment decision rather than a long-planned one. Given this and the original work's influence, Lynn's attitude toward the Storm Pigeon was neutral, neither too negative nor too positive. This time, Lynn planned to invite the Storm Pigeon mainly to see if he could gain some of his abilities for free. As a top-tier Sequence 0 in combat, Lynn was truly coveting the Storm Pigeon's abilities. Besides, since he had already invited others, after a few seconds of thought, Lynn decided to send an invitation to the Storm Pigeon as well. As for how to attract the Storm Pigeon to the tea party, Lynn thought for a few seconds and considered that rather than guiding him through schemes, perhaps kidnapping him would be faster. Just kidding. Lynn actually planned to write a letter to the Storm Pigeon, discussing the possibility of the original creator's resurrection in the eternal blazing sun and 100 ways to deal with the eternal blazing sun. Lynn believed that after reading the letter, the Storm Pigeon's likelihood of attending was quite high. Even if the letter fails, Lynn wouldn't lose anything. As for whether these individuals with mutual grudges would fight when gathered, Lynn thought the likelihood was low. He believed that precisely because there were many people, mutual checks and balances would prevent conflicts. Moreover, Lynn wasn't absent. He would be responsible for maintaining the peace of the gathering and suppressing troublemakers. This could also serve to show off his strength, intimidating others slightly, making future actions easier. While the invitation issue was easy to resolve, Lynn soon found himself troubled by another problem. he couldn't force everyone to become children like he did with Amon. For figures like the Evernight goddess, it was obviously inappropriate. But if they don't become children, the biggest significance of this tea party is lost. A tea party with child versions of the gods is much more interesting. Thinking this, Lynn couldn't help but show a troubled expression. His gaze then swept across Bethel and Antigonus in front of him. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his eyes lit up as he looked at Mr. Door and said, "Bethel, with my assistance, can you create a space where everyone entering turns into a child?" Forcing everyone individually to become children was impossible, but if becoming a child was an implicit rule of the tea party. As long as everyone, including Lynn, turned into a child, even if there were objections, Lynn could justify it. This is the rule of the tea party. If you don't like it, don't attend. Of course, as a principled person, Lynn would write this point on the invitation in advance. Although this might make some people refuse to attend, Lynn believed he could still attract them with some negotiation. After all, for high-sequence beyonders in the mysterious world, even those who betrayed each other yesterday could cooperate for benefits today. These small matters of face were trivial. Lynn believed he could achieve a satisfactory result. Even if he failed, he wouldn't lose anything. The only issue was whether Bethel could accomplish this task. Thinking this, Lynn immediately looked at Mr. Door, his eyes filled with anticipation. Bethel was stunned for a moment and then slowly displayed a question mark on his forehead. The spiritual reminder made Bethel feel an unprecedented sense of crisis. Bethel pondered for a moment before saying, "Are you planning to hold the tea party in such a space?" Obviously, Bethel knew Lynn very well. Exactly. Lynn nodded without hesitation and added, "No need to seal their powers like with Amon. Just making them look smaller is enough, but it must be effective for Sequence 0. I'm planning to hold a tea party involving about 5 Sequence 0s and several angels." Even Bethel couldn't help but widen his eyes at this moment, wondering if he had heard wrong. Otherwise, how could he hear something so outrageous? However, the cold air made it clear that Bethel hadn't misheard. Lynn indeed planned to do this. Has he gone mad? This was Bethel's second thought. But Bethel knew Lynn wasn't crazy. On one hand, with Lynn's strength, even 5 Sequence 0s might not be able to do much to him. On the other hand, Mr. Door believed Lynn was a person with a sense of boundary. Because Lynn indeed always acted within boundary, everything he did, though making Bethel feel his heart challenged, never truly crossed certain lines. Such a Lynn wouldn't actively do anything that would make him an enemy of the world. Thinking this, Bethel gradually calmed down. He looked at Lynn and confirmed, "Is this a friendly gathering among friends?" "You could say that. At least most of them aren't hostile to me, and don't worry, I won't actively make enemies of the world, so this is indeed just a friendly tea party." Lynn blinked at Bethel, showing a reassuring smile. With this assurance, Bethel completely relaxed. After pondering for a while, he said, "If that's the case, I can indeed give it a try." This wasn't empty talk. Although the target was Sequence 0, if it was just about changing appearances, with Lynn's assistance, it wasn't a big challenge for Bethel. There was just one thing. Bethel looked at Antigonus, his expression serious and earnest, and said, "With Antigonus's help, I would be more confident. The fool is better at this kind of transformation than I am." The serious tone and earnest gaze made it unclear whether Bethel genuinely thought so or wanted to drag Antigonus into sharing the risk, or perhaps both. End of chapter. What? Antigonus was clearly baffled. He looked at Lynn, then at Bethel. His mind was still replaying the conversation between Lynn and Bethel, but at this moment, this demonic wolf was not just bewildered, he also felt like cursing. However, Antigonus quickly snapped out of his confusion. After a few seconds of hesitation, he said, "If there's really something I can help with, I don't mind lending a hand." Though his spiritual intuition told Antigonus that this might be a huge pitfall, he had no choice but to jump in with his eyes closed. Jumping into the pit at most made him an accomplice. Even if a Sequence 0 became angry, at least as a semi-fool, Antigonus could run if he couldn't fight a Sequence 0. Even if there were 5 Sequence 0s, they couldn't possibly all chase after one weak accomplice like him. But if he didn't jump, Antigonus was sure he wouldn't even be able to escape. He could only flee into the historical void, and his opponent could directly alter history. Thus, Antigonus made a very cautious decision. Even if it meant going against the world, he couldn't afford to offend Lynn in front of him. This person was far more terrifying than those Sequence Zero's. Moreover, Antigonus glanced at Lynn cautiously. Though he had always feared Lynn, Antigonus had a gut feeling that Lynn wasn't that insane, so his mention of a friend might be genuine. If that was the case, things shouldn't escalate to the point where Sequence Zero's would chase after him, right? Better not be too confident. Maybe it's best to prepare for an escape in advance. Antigonus wasn't too sure, but he didn't forget another matter and quickly added, however, I think Amon could be a great help in this matter. The abilities of the Worm of Time are very suitable for assisting with this task. Yes, without hesitation, Antigonus decided to drag Amon into this. The superficial camaraderie of the three cowards was fully displayed at this moment. Bethel's space isolation and sealing, little Antigonus's grafting and alteration, Amon's bug exploiting, plus my time authority, it does sound very reasonable. Lynn, rubbing his chin thoughtfully, nodded. He clearly saw that the three cowards were ready to go all out, but this didn't stop him from seriously analyzing their roles in this matter. And surprisingly, it made a lot of sense. Lynn even felt that without his help, these three might still be able to create the space he wanted. As for whether Amon would refuse to help, Lynn doubted it. Amon was a genuine trickster who wouldn't miss such an opportunity to both strengthen their relationship and cause chaos. But Bethel and Antigonus, Lynn looked at the two scoundrel kings of angels before him. He hadn't expected them to agree so readily. After all, Lynn knew how ridiculous this plan sounded. If anyone else proposed such an idea, they'd be deemed insane. Even though Lynn knew the risks were within a controllable range, he also had the power to suppress any unexpected incidents. But others didn't know that. In this situation, for Bethel and Antigonus to choose to trust him and help him with such an absurd plan, whether out of fear or friendship, Lynn was satisfied with their response. Indeed, my charisma is still that strong, Lynn shamelessly thought to himself. Then, placing a hand on Bethel and Antigonus's shoulders, he smiled and said, You're making a lot of sense. So let's team up and find Amon. Do any of you know where Amon is? There's a fixed location near the Abraham family where one of Amon's avatars resides. We can start by finding that avatar and then ask for Amon's true location. Bethel replied solemnly, looking completely calm as he actively dragged his superficial colleagues into the pit. Even if that Amon avatar refuses to tell us the true location, I can try to locate the true form through the avatar. If Bethel assists me, I can attempt to directly alter the positions of Amon's avatar and true form, with a high probability of success. Antigonus responded eagerly. It was evident that his initial reluctance had turned into a subtle anticipation of the upcoming events. Then let's set off immediately. Lynn decided firmly. However, just before Mr. Door opened the space door, Lynn added, as if remembering something, Oh, by the way, if you manage to create the space I need, as a reward, I can grant you one request, as long as it doesn't violate my principles. Antigonus's ears perked up at this, and he almost blurted out, Does asking you to never come looking for me violate your principles? But he held back and cautiously asked, What are your principles? Bethel also quietly awaited Lynn's answer. My principles are simple. First, do not harm those I care about. Second, do not slaughter innocents. Lynn stated calmly, raising a finger for each principle. After listing his principles, he continued, Though there are many restrictions, you can still ask for my help in battles not involving those I care about. You can also seek my assistance if you're about to die, or ask me to save someone. But remember, you can only choose one person. After all, my abilities are limited. Lynn's gaze fell on Bethel, then swept over Antigonus, and finally rested on the Mother of the Sky, who had been a silent background presence. He paused briefly before quickly looking away. This small detail didn't go unnoticed by Antigonus and Bethel. The former was momentarily stunned, clearly realizing something, and his expression changed. The latter also showed a thoughtful look. Unlike Bethel, who wasn't as familiar with Lynn's future prediction abilities, Antigonus, who knew Lynn could alter history, was closer to understanding the truth of Lynn's power. Thus, Seeing Lynn's meaningful glance at the Mother of the Sky, Antigonus naturally thought of some possibilities. For instance, the era they were in might also be the past for Lynn. Perhaps in the future, his sister had already fallen. Although it sounded incredible, for Antigonus, who had experienced Lynn's interventions in history, it was understandable. Since time held no meaning for Lynn, any space-time he occupied was normal, right? But how could his sister be in danger? She wouldn't leave the nation of Evernight easily. Antigonus first showed a puzzled expression, then turned serious. Unless the nation of Evernight was also destroyed. Honestly, this future terrified Antigonus. He wasn't so afraid of his own demise, but if he survived while his sister and the nation of Evernight didn't, what would he have left? Antigonus suddenly felt a bit lost. End of chapter. Lynn, who deliberately reminded Antigonus, silently shifted his gaze. He did so intentionally because Antigonus had given him a satisfactory attitude in response. Therefore, Lynn naturally reciprocated with equally generous rewards. As for Mr. Door, let's not forget that Lynn had long decided to rescue him from the mother goddess of depravity, essentially prepaying the remuneration. This doesn't mean that Lynn plans to retract his promise to Mr. Door. The other party can still use this request. Lynn has always been generous with his friends. Although rescuing the Mother of the Sky might cause a disagreement with the Evernight goddess, the Mother of the Sky is only a sequence 2 and poses almost no threat to the Evernight, Lynn pondered, rubbing his chin. To be honest, if it weren't for Antigonus's extremely poor condition and the Evernight goddess hoping to have a Lord of Mysteries as an ally, she might not have destroyed the nation of Evernight. So, if negotiations go well, it might be possible to convince Ammonizes to spare the Mother of the Sky. Lynn saw this clearly. Ammonizes didn't care much about the survivors of the Night of the Wolf family massacre. Although she might pay particular attention to Antigonus, who took the fool's uniqueness, she evidently didn't put much importance on the Mother of the Sky. Even regarding Antigonus, from the details in the original work, Lynn could see that the Evernight goddess didn't have a "leave no survivors" attitude. Otherwise, after Antigonus awakened in the original story, he wouldn't just feel like he had a dream and dare not move, he would be completely incapacitated. The destruction of the nation of Evernight and the transformation of the Mother of the Sky into the Evernight goddess's divine descent vessel largely lay on Antigonus's shoulders. Lynn suspected that if it weren't for the overwhelming will of the celestial worthy within Antigonus, making him an inevitable vessel for the revival of the mysteries, the Evernight goddess might not have destroyed the nation of Evernight. Unfortunately, there's no if. Antigonus wasn't useful in this regard, so Lynn never thought of rescuing this foolish wolf. It's not just because the feelings haven't reached that point but also because Lynn sees no need. With Antigonus's state, it's impossible for him to become the Lord of Mysteries. The original ending is most fitting. After rescuing the Mother of the Sky, perhaps these siblings could work for the Fool's Church or stay in Lynn's Eye of Secrets to work. Perfect. The remaining issue is the nation of Evernight. Lynn felt some regret for this peaceful country's demise, but it involved the Evernight goddess's principles. Ammonizes might be willing to give up a relatively harmless sequence too but would not fail to eliminate Antigonus's anchor. Of course, this problem isn't entirely unsolvable, such as having Antigonus dissolve the nation of Evernight and change the faith of its people, or... Lynn glanced at Antigonus, recalling Palez's choice in the original work. Or, you could voluntarily relinquish your full uniqueness and attendant of mysteries characteristic, give up the competition for the mysteries, and continue to live a secluded life in the nation of Evernight with your sister, Lynn thought. Lynn could see that although both had experienced the Night of the Wolf family massacre, Antigonus and the Mother of the Sky were more fearful than vengeful towards the Evernight. After all, both were born mythological creatures. The annihilation demonic wolf is such an utterly unqualified father. In this situation, it would be strange for Antigonus and the Mother of the Sky to seek revenge. In fact, those who had such thoughts among the wolves wouldn't have survived until now. They would either have died during the Night of the Wolf family massacre or subsequently in attempts to avenge against the Evernight. Those who survived had long buried that old hatred. So, in this situation, if Antigonus withdrew from the Mysteries Advancement competition and found a reliable backer, the Evernight goddess likely wouldn't specifically target him anymore. They might continue as before, not interfering with each other, or even become allies. However, this is not something Lynn can decide. He can only give Antigonus some hints at most and help rescue the Mother of the Sky. What Antigonus chooses is beyond Lynn's control. After all, Lynn is not a savior and has no obligation to save everyone. The nation of Evernight, built and ruled by Antigonus, should naturally have its fate chosen by him. Saving the nation of Evernight is Antigonus's responsibility, not Lynn's. He can only provide some small help. If Antigonus insists on leading the nation of Evernight to its demise, Lynn has no solution. Not only because Lynn wouldn't ruin his relationship with the Evernight goddess for the nation of Evernight, but also because he can't bet humanity's future on whether Antigonus can resist the will of the Lord of Mysteries and not become the old Mysteries revival vessel, a situation with a 99% chance of a negative outcome. That would be playing with the world's future. By then, it wouldn't just be the nation of Evernight perishing but the entire world. In this regard, Lynn's attitude is actually aligned with Amon's. He's just more gentle and willing to handle things more gently. But when it comes to being ruthless, Lynn will be equally cold and decisive. While Lynn pondered the future of the nation of Evernight, Antigonus also returned from his thoughts. He looked somewhat depressed, shook his wolf head, and seemed to suppress those gloomy emotions. Antigonus then glanced at the Mother of the Sky, who looked confused, then at Lynn, seriously saying, "I don't know what the future holds, but if my sister is to fall in the future, I hope you can save her once. This is my request." Antigonus was evidently a wolf with sense. Despite the turmoil in his heart, he didn't make a request for Lynn to ensure his sister's perpetual survival, only hoping for her to be saved once. Antigonus could see that someone like Lynn wouldn't want to become another's nanny due to a single request. If he made such a request, Lynn might still agree and keep his word, but any slight goodwill towards Antigonus would likely be exhausted. "If you can complete the work, of course," Lynn smiled at Antigonus, knowing he had moved a step closer to recruiting the little wolf. He then looked at Bethel and said, "Bethel, have you thought about how to use this request?" "I probably hope you won't kill Emperor Tutor," Bethel said with a helpless smile. "Pranking or beating him up is fine, but please don't kill him." Isn't this overlapping with the deal with Adam?" Lynn blinked, then said with a straight face, "Well, since it's your request, Bethel, I promise. As long as Tutor doesn't take the initiative against me, I won't kill him." "Great. Sold Tutor once again." End of chapter. Tutor naturally didn't know that his life had been sold twice without his knowledge. If Tutor knew, he would surely be deeply moved, then continue cursing while researching how to kill the primordial demoness and ascend to become a great old one. Unfortunately, he didn't know. Meanwhile, Lynn, who had sold Tutor twice, returned to the Abraham family residence with Bethel and Antigonus and smoothly found the resident Amon avatar nearby. "First of all, I'm just an ordinary sequence 4 avatar. Even if you kill me, it doesn't mean much to the main body." The Amon avatar pinched his crystal monocle and, facing his encirclement by the superficial colleagues and Lynn, remained calm, speaking quickly. "Secondly, as a mere sequence 4, I clearly can't resist you. So you can state your demands directly, and I'll cooperate." The Amon avatar's tone was natural and righteous, as if he wasn't selling out his main body but discussing the fine weather. "Amon is truly lucky to have an avatar like you," Lynn remarked, his expression slightly complicated. Although it wasn't his first encounter with an Amon avatar, he couldn't help but feel his understanding refreshed each time. In a certain sense, it was impressive that Amon hadn't developed a split personality over the years. "I'm just fulfilling the main body's order to survive as long as possible, so naturally, I must strive to stay alive." Faced with Lynn's sarcastic tone, the Amon avatar remained calm and even seemed self-righteous. "Moreover, you came to me for the main body, so naturally, this trouble should be borne by the main body. Every Amon avatar has the right to strive for survival and shouldn't easily give up just to protect the main body. Because every avatar could become the main body in the future." Lynn recalled the original conclusion, smiling. The Amon avatar glanced at Lynn but didn't refute. Indeed, the thought process of insectoid mythical creatures is different from that of ordinary mythical creatures, Lynn said thoughtfully. Although both had avatars, Lynn noticed significant differences between himself and the Amon avatar. While Amon avatars could be said to each have their own personalities, they fundamentally shared one persona, unlike the fragmented personalities of a spectator's avatars. This was also evident in the Fool pathway, where the puppet and error avatars had much in common, but in the door pathway. Lynn glanced at Bethel, then at the adept avatar and puppet players Amon and Antigonus, and couldn't help but lament, "Bethel, though your apprentice pathway has the same insectoid mythical creature form, you seem so out of place, totally not fitting the style." While the Fool and error played with time, history, grafting, theft, puppets, and avatars, the door was immersed in space and ceiling, making it hard to believe they were neighboring pathways based on style alone. The door pathway can also split off avatars, just not as easily as the error and Fool, Bethel defended after a few seconds of silence. Though he occasionally wondered if the apprentice pathway was somewhat off track when watching others play with avatars and puppets, he couldn't admit it now. In theory, all pathways can split off avatars, Lynn remarked, rubbing his chin with a grin, then patted Bethel's shoulder. But don't worry, even if your style is out of place, your spatial abilities are amazing. That's an advantage the Fool and error can't replace. Thanks for the compliment, Bethel replied, accepting Lynn's praise with a blank expression. Lynn's wandering thoughts finally returned to the main topic. He then looked at Amon with a smile. "Since Amon's avatar is willing to cooperate, please take us to your main body. We have some matters to discuss with him." His tone was gentle, his smile serene, like a harmless friend. The Amon avatar thought for a moment, then nodded, "Okay." Although just a Sequence 4 avatar, he could discern that even if he refused this request, the opposite side could forcefully use him for positioning. So why refuse and suffer unnecessarily? So this is why you brought them here. In another small house of Adam, Amon looked at his avatar and the luxurious lineup behind it, pushing his crystal monocle with a smile. "I'm just fulfilling the main body's order to minimize unnecessary casualties and prioritize survival," the Amon avatar responded unhurriedly. "Hey, you indeed perfectly fulfilled my order," Amon chuckled, seemingly not angry, and said with a smile, "Next time during the full Amon voting, I'll remember to vote for you." Rest assured, main body. Many of us avatars have already reached a consensus. "We'll definitely vote for you in the next full Amon voting," the Amon avatar replied, showing that he had inherited the main body's traits and was a solid hunter pathway talent. "Then I'll look forward to your performance in the next full Amon voting," Amon said without much anger, waving to dismiss the annoying avatar. Amon then looked at Lynn, Bethel, and Antigonus with a smile. "I suppose you didn't come just for a tea party." "But it actually is related to tea," Lynn smiled. "I plan to host a gods' tea party, inviting many true gods, including Tutor and Solomon, as well as angels like Medici. Conservatively, the first tea party will have about 5 Sequence 0 participants and several angels. So I hope to get your help in creating an alternate space where everyone entering will revert to a child form, as the tea party venue. Bethel and Antigonus have already agreed to help me create this space, now it's just you." Amon. End of chapter. Even Amon, known as the Blasphemer, was genuinely stunned at this moment, producing thoughts similar to Mr. Door earlier. This can't be blamed on him. After all, Amon's mischievous level was clearly still lacking compared to Lynn. Although he had also played pranks on Sequence 0, he had never played as big as Lynn did. But along with the absurdity, Amon couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement deep within. As the god of mischief, Amon, the former #1 troublemaker, was obviously a qualified fun lover. Hence, even imagining a tea party where the gods turned into children was irresistibly tempting for him. He could almost visualize the gods' funny and childish appearances after turning into children, an allure he could hardly resist as a fun lover. However, Amon remained Amon. Despite the excitement and anticipation welling up inside, he maintained a composed expression and keenly noticed something. Amon adjusted his crystal monocle and looked at Lynn, saying, "If I remember correctly, Medici seems to have fallen." Bethel and Antigonus also looked at Lynn at this time. Apparently, the news of Medici's resurrection hadn't reached the Tudor Empire. This was normal, given that Medici had only been resurrected a few days ago. Without a grand announcement in the Solomon Empire, it was normal for the news not to have spread, especially since Antigonus was a recluse and Bethel had been busy with Lynn. Didn't Adam tell you? I resurrected Medici. Lynn pretended to be surprised, glancing at Amon before looking at Adam, who stood quietly in the corner like a background figure, and said, Adam contributed a lot to this matter. No fault, no flaw. After all, Medici needed Adam's treatment to fully revive into a normal spiritual state without side effects. Of course, Lynn admitted he was indeed sowing discord. As for whether revealing Medici's resurrection would affect a certain Red Angel's plans, come on, Adam already knew, he couldn't possibly not warn Tudor about the Red Angel's trap. So, whether he said it or not made no difference. Lynn believed the Tudor Empire would receive the news of the Red Angel's return in a few days anyway. I just made a small contribution. Adam, still with that compassionate smile, showed no reaction to being outed. So that annoying Red Angel is really revived. Well, it should be simple for Lynn. Antigonus glanced at Lynn, feeling a touch of envy towards the Red Angel. As for other thoughts, Antigonus had none. After all, he hadn't interacted much with Medici, so he didn't care much about his resurrection. Bethel, however, suddenly realized why Lynn had so easily agreed to not kill Tudor. Since the victim had been resurrected, it was only right for the victim to seek revenge themselves. Even if Medici revived, he was still only sequence 2. Despite having the true creator and Solomon behind him, without Lynn's intervention, revenge wouldn't be easy. Bethel thought, sighing internally and feeling a sense of crisis for Alistair Tudor. Perhaps in the future, Tudor will indeed pay the price for past mistakes and completely fall. Bethel murmured to himself, feeling helpless and regretful, but not overly heartbroken. Ultimately, Mr. Dorr didn't want Tudor dead because of their friendship and because he didn't want his investment to go to waste. Similarly, Adam didn't want Tudor to fall for similar reasons. But if you were to say Bethel and the Blood Emperor had a life-and-death friendship, that would be nonsense. Given the chance, Mr. Dorr would do his best to save Tudor, which was why he risked persuading Lynn and used a request on Tudor. But if it couldn't be done, Bethel wouldn't go to death for Tudor, their friendship wasn't that deep. If Tudor fell in the future, Bethel could only offer white flowers at his grave and take care of his descendants, which would be the best he could do. Amon was obviously the most surprised, glancing at Adam as if realizing something, then turning back to Lynn, saying, then congratulations to him. I hope he doesn't hold too much of a grudge, otherwise, even I would be troubled. The previous matter referred to here was naturally Amon and Adam helping Tudor turn Medici into a stew. But whether Amon's trouble was due to fearing Medici's revenge or fearing Medici instigating Lynn for revenge was unclear. People must pay for their actions, but don't worry too much. Neither I nor Medici will truly kill you. Lynn, as if comforting, said, then brought the topic back. So, Amon, are you willing to assist me in hosting the gods' tea party? Aren't you afraid of offending too many people at once? It won't be easy to deal with so many true gods and angels simultaneously, even for you. Amon adjusted his monocle, smiling as if probing. Rest assured, I just want to host a friendly tea party where everyone can revisit their childhood and chat about whatever they want. The invitees are not enemies, so there's nothing to worry about. Lynn spoke slowly, looking at Amon and adding, also, thank you for your concern, but you're overthinking. Just a few sequence 0s can't truly threaten me. Amon's smile froze. He stared at Lynn, discerning if he was serious. Finally, Amon could only conclude that the other party genuinely believed so. It seems Libert is even more mysterious than I thought. Tisk, I should have avoided Tudor's business, it feels like a loss. Amon thought but didn't panic. He could see Libert's other statement was also true, neither Libert nor Medici would really kill him. As long as he wouldn't die, Amon wasn't worried. He feared death, but he also enjoyed the thrill of walking a tightrope, which was why he became the blasphemer. So Amon smiled at Lynn, if I assist you, what do I gain? Sure enough, my nephew's resilience is strong. Good, this will be fun. Lynn could see through Amon's thoughts and, pleased, answered with a smile, if you agree to help, I will trouble you less in the future. Otherwise, be ready to be beaten by me every day. Amon might like excitement, but not being beaten every day. Indeed, Amon's smile froze instantly. End of chapter. Although Lynn's differential treatment of Amon had reached a point where even Bethel and Antigonus looked at Amon with sympathetic and schadenfreude-filled eyes, Amon ultimately agreed to assist Lynn in creating the alternate space. There was no other way. While Amon wanted to refuse, his curiosity about the gods, tea party for children, proposed by Lynn, and his certainty that Lynn might actually beat him up daily if he refused, left him no choice. Amon enjoyed pranks and fun, but he had no intention of becoming someone's punching bag. After successfully roping in Amon, Lynn naturally extended an invitation to Adam, who had been watching. Adam agreed without hesitation. As a godlike robot, devoid of emotions, Adam had no shame in becoming a child. For him, participating in the tea party to understand Lynn's intentions was far more important. Even without Lynn's invitation, Adam would likely have found a way to join the tea party. His enthusiasm was touching. If only every invitee were as enthusiastic as Adam, I'd save a lot of trouble, Lynn mused, while simultaneously managing his second persona in the fourth epic to create the special space for the tea party with Bethel, Antigonus, and Amon. He glanced at the pocket watch on his desk, noting it was 2:45 p.m., just 15 minutes before the tarot gathering. Indeed, while his second persona was busy with the tea party preparations in the fourth epic, in the fifth epic, the tarot gathering organized by Mr. Fool, who had recently advanced to Sequence 7 Magician, was about to commence. This was Lynn's third tarot gathering, but he remained as eager and interested as ever. Watching Mr. Fool act was particularly amusing for Lynn, who could later replicate the scenes perfectly with his drawing skills, ensuring that when Mr. Fool wanted to reminisce in the future, he'd have material readily available. I truly am a good partner for Mr. Fool, Lynn shamelessly praised himself, glancing at his desk calendar filled with circled dates and annotations only he could understand. Though the fifth epic was the most relaxed era for Lynn, requiring only steady advancement and waiting for his persona to pave the way for his ascension to in Great Old One, his mischievous nature still led him to plan numerous activities. For instance, soon he would join Klein and Sharon in eliminating the pursuers from the Rose School of Thought. Next Tuesday's Russell Memorial Exhibition also intrigued him. Not just the Russell Memorial Exhibition next Tuesday. According to the original timeline, shortly after this tarot gathering, there should be another Blood Moon Night, where Furs the Salted Fish joins, Lynn thought, tapping a date on the calendar. Once Salted Fish joins, I can investigate the Abraham family. Additionally, he considered meeting Emlyn White, who was likely still imprisoned in the Harvest Church. He could use a commission as a pretext to visit and trigger this storyline with Klein, while cautiously observing Earth Mother's response. An idea sparked in Lynn's mind. If Earth Mother is watching, even better. I can gauge her attitude. Initially, I planned to send letters to the gods after the alternate space was prepared, but I could write and send them now, choosing appropriate targets for preliminary contact. Evernight doesn't need further contact for now. She's far more scheming than me. Better to interact indirectly through Klein for now, and consider direct contact later, Lynn recalled Evernight Goddess's schemes, shaking his head. As for the Lord of Storms, let's wait until after the tea party. I don't want to provoke a lightning storm from him. His temper makes that possible. The best candidate for now is Earth Mother. Though she's also scheming, she knows less than Evernight, making her ideal for initial contact. Deciding this, Lynn saw that the pocket watch now showed 3 p.m. A familiar sense of disorientation swept over him as he was pulled above the gray fog, where he heard Miss Justice's familiar greeting. "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool." Her cheerful voice seemed to brighten the atmosphere for all tarot members. As usual, Miss Justice greeted everyone before looking up at the head of the bronze table and raising her hand. "Mr. Fool, I've obtained a new page of Russell's diary this time." I remember Audrey didn't present a diary page at this point in the original timeline. Could this be a butterfly effect? Lynn thought, glancing at her. Curious about the content of this unexpected diary, Lynn caught glimpses of some words. He maintained a composed expression, but inwardly he was almost laughing. It wasn't Russell's diary, but his own, Lynn's diary. I should have anticipated this. Just like in the original, tarot members occasionally submitted fabricated diaries. To them, my Chinese diary and Russell's Chinese diary are indistinguishable. Mixing them up is understandable, but Lynn continued to act naturally while internally pondering, did the butler act so quickly? I only recently gave him the diary, and it's already made its way to the future. He felt a thrill. Although he had prepared these diaries as Easter eggs for Russell and Klein, Lynn hadn't expected one to surface so soon. It was akin to placing an order online and finding out the seller was just downstairs, delivering instantly, a pleasant surprise. Without his exceptional acting skills, Lynn might have burst into laughter. End of chapter. Yes, and if I remember correctly, this diary should be about the time I patted the Evernight goddess's head. Lynn recalled the modified content of his diary, feeling a sudden anticipation for Mr. Fool's reaction after reading it. Although he knew Mr. Fool should be able to control his expressions using the clown abilities, his internal drama would surely be abundant. If, after the tarot meeting, Mr. Fool found an excuse to share this diary with him, it would be even more interesting. Lynn was very much looking forward to this. In this anticipation, the Fool, Klein, waved his hand and collected the page of the diary provided by Audrey and the one provided by Alger, then began reading them quietly. The diary provided by the hanged man Alger was naturally a proper Russell's diary, primarily mentioning Emperor Russell's discovery of the law of Beander characteristics convergence, adding another knowledge point to Mr. Fool. And the famous diary entry, 16th January, the taste of a demoness still isn't bad. It greatly shocked Mr. Fool, almost making him lose control of his expression. One couldn't blame Klein for this. After all, it was well known that every demoness had once been a man. From this perspective, Emperor Russell was indeed a remarkable person. Not only did he have a peculiar relationship with a demoness, but he also specifically wrote it in his diary. No wonder he suffered a social death among the remnants of the past. Who knows if Emperor Russell would want to slap himself when he thought of this incident years later. However, aside from this shocking diary entry, this time, Russell's diary also provided Klein with another valuable piece of information. Emperor Russell had disguised a certain card of blasphemy as a bookmark and clipped it in a very valuable book. Emperor, why didn't you make it clear which book you clipped it in? Klein had the urge to complain but restrained himself due to Mr. Fool's demeanor, controlling his expression with his clown ability. He then looked at the page provided by Miss Justice, hoping to gain some useful information. However, one look at it left Klein completely stunned. If not for the gray fog's concealment, Miss Justice might have noticed the cracks in Mr. Fool's facade. But Klein felt this wasn't his fault. The content of this diary was too surprising. Times year times month times day, today we officially set off with Medici following Saussure to the land of the demonic wolf. I hope we can successfully meet Amonizes this time. I am quite curious about this being who will become the Evernight goddess in the future. Although I've seen her future, I need to interact with her to truly understand what kind of person she is. Additionally, Amonizes' mythical creature form seems to be a demonic wolf. I kind of want to pat her head. Will the demonic wolf's fur be as fluffy as a regular dog's? Honestly, upon seeing the top of this page, Klein already sensed something was off. Although it didn't explicitly mention names, the phrase, "seen her future," immediately made Klein think of a certain person. Lynn, or rather the former Angel of Secrets. This diary, with a style very different from Russell's, might not be Russell's work but from someone he was familiar with. But the Evernight goddess's real name is Amonizes. Lynn actually wanted to pet the mythical creature form of the Evernight goddess's head. Klein didn't know how to comment on his little friend. It made him think, indeed, a rascal would always be a rascal. He continued reading the rest of the diary. Times year times month times day, I patted the head of a demonic wolf. The fur was rough, feeling a bit like pine needles, but it was worth noting that it didn't shed. How could there be a big dog in the world that doesn't shed? It's amazing. But afterwards, whenever Amonizes looked at me, there was always a hint of maternal kindness in her eyes. Did I act too much like an infant? Worthy of me, Klein. Klein didn't know what to say. Should he be shocked that Lynn actually managed to pat the Evernight goddess's head, or be amazed that the Evernight goddess not only tolerated such a bold action but also looked at Lynn with a kind, motherly gaze? But, a child. Did Lynn transmigrate as a child initially? Klein couldn't help but imagine his friend's child form in his mind, then quickly dismissed the thought, continuing to read the diary. Times year times month times day. Saussure told me that tomorrow is the day the plan begins, asking me to prepare in advance to save people on the battlefield. I have no problem with that, just a bit worried about Little Red. Although he will become a true war angel in the future and one of the 8 kings of angels, theoretically able to move freely on such a battlefield, he's currently only a sequence 2 weather warlock. He talks irritatingly too. It feels like if I don't watch over him, he could get himself killed in minutes. Indeed, I should act with Medici tomorrow. Lynn, I'm indeed a good brother. So, this is indeed Lynn's diary. Although he had guessed it at first glance, seeing the definitive proof still made Klein a bit excited. At the same time, he couldn't help but be curious about what event Lynn was involved in, which related to the Evernight goddess in a battlefield, indicating it wasn't a minor matter. It seemed this war angel Medici was Lynn's brother. But what does King of Angels mean? It sounds like it's not just an ordinary angel. Who is Saussure then? Another angel? Since it was still early in the storyline, Klein naturally hadn't encountered information about the War Angel and the Dark Angel. He had only learned about the ancient sun god through Little Sun and wasn't aware of the 8 kings of angels around the sun god, leaving him to speculate wildly as he looked at the last part of the diary. Times year times month times day. I saved many people on the battlefield today. Perhaps in gratitude, they decided to worship me. Times year times month times day. While helping Saussure with official duties today, I saw his future self, the fallen lunatic, the true creator. No, that wasn't Saussure. It was just a madman inheriting Saussure's memories and emotions, but with a completely different personality. Maybe I should consider changing Saussure's fate. How can my guardian end up with such a predetermined fate? It must be a happy ending. But I haven't figured out how to do it yet. It seems like I need to plan carefully. The diary ended abruptly here. However, these last few lines conveyed a huge amount of information, almost making Mr. Fool unable to resist looking in Lynn's direction. Fortunately, Klein controlled himself, his mind racing at this moment. End of chapter.